After months of anticipation, Yooka-Laylee has finally arrived on the Nintendo Switch, and it feels right at home. Yooka-Laylee is a sprawling platformer with a focus on exploration, and the jump to modern hardware has enabled its designers to create worlds much larger and more complex than the games which inspired it. Which is precisely why there has been some trepidation leading up to its release. You see, Yooka-Laylee is a large-scale Unity game on the Switch. While we've seen a lot of Unity titles on the system since its launch, the average performance level hasn't always been optimal even in relatively simple titles. So how would a large-scale game such as this scale down to Nintendo's hybrid console? Thankfully, we found the answer rather quickly. Mere minutes into the Switch version of the game, it's clear that the development team has managed to overcome this challenge and has delivered a great version of the game. In fact, at first glance, you may not even spot any difference between it and the other console versions. Look a little closer, however, and differences start to become evident, but in this case it only serves to highlight how much effort has been poured into tweaking the visuals and presentation specifically for this platform. Beyond the porting process, this is also the latest iteration of Yooka-Laylee, which includes various tweaks and changes designed to smooth out the experience. The camera system is improved and the overall game simply feels more polished and buttoned up this time around. So how about the basics then? Resolution. Well, we've known for a while that Yooka Switch would target a lower resolution than PS4 and Xbox One, and that's precisely the case. When running in docked mode, Yooka-Laylee runs at 900p, while portable mode is 600p instead. It's a good compromise for the system that strikes a reasonable balance between image quality and performance, especially in portable mode where the game manages to look quite clean despite the sub-native resolution. After recently coming off of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which can drop below 480p, this is a nice improvement. But when compared directly with the PlayStation 4 version of the game, it becomes clear that the changes run much deeper with loads of little nips and tucks found across the game. Right from the start, differences are apparent. The subtle use of depth of field across distant scenery is now absent on Switch, a change which makes sense considering the impact depth of field can have on fill rate. Next up, the resolution of shadow maps has been reduced, resulting in less shadow definition across the world and beneath characters. At least in this case, the shadows are nicely filtered, preventing them from appearing chunky despite their lower overall resolution. In addition, ambient occlusion is now absent on the Switch, which has a minor impact on the look and feel of certain areas. Lighting has been modified in many scenes as well. It was necessary to reduce the number of reflection probes on the Switch, and this difference can be observed in specific areas like the hub here. Notice how the red glow from the surrounding pipe is absent on Switch. Thankfully, in the end, it simply looks different in most scenes rather than worse, and the hub is where you're most likely to notice it. More surprisingly, certain objects and chunks of base geometry have been modified for the Switch version. These bushes placed around the first world, for instance, have been remade for the Switch version with less overall detail in order to improve rendering speed. Sure, it looks a little rough up close, but from a normal gameplay distance, it's perfectly fine. In most cases though, the base geometry remains relatively unchanged, but when you flip back and forth between the two versions, you can definitely notice subtle differences across the board. And this is an important thing to think about too, as it demonstrates the extra work poured into building an optimized Switch version of the game. Rather than simply brute forcing original assets at the expense of performance, the art has been adjusted to fit the performance profile, and in some cases, new assets have been created. Well, okay, most of the assets are the same as the original version, but the fact that some of them have been changed highlights the extra effort poured into this version. The last thing I want to mention then is the texture filtering, which predictably is reduced from what we've seen on the other consoles. Oh yes, and the quality of the water rendering has also been slightly reduced on the Switch with slightly lower resolution surface detail. Okay, so yeah, overall this certainly sounds like a lot of changes, doesn't it? This isn't simply a case of dialing down settings and shipping, however, and that's what makes this port so interesting. A lot of care was poured into making certain that these changes would have minimal impact on the overall presentation, and in that sense, it's a complete success. It really does look like Yooka-Laylee. And getting to this point certainly wasn't easy. Despite its short development time on the Switch, there were still issues along the way that demonstrate the challenge of working with third-party tools such as Unity. We were told, for instance, in the case of Yooka-Laylee, the version of Unity the team used for optimizing was lacking some desired features, which happened to be present in a newer version. Unfortunately, that newer version also resulted in slower performance overall, so it wasn't really possible to use it. The team put in a request with Unity to patch in the desired features into this version, but that of course requires lots of waiting. So, did it pay off? Well, the short answer is yes, but there's a little more to it than that. Now, by and large, Yooka-Laylee turns in a very stable 30 frames per second experience on the Switch. There's no weird stuttering here, hitching, or any other performance problems really that you might expect in a large game like this. Yes, 60 FPS would have been preferred, especially since this is a platformer, no doubt about it, but this is a 30 FPS game on the PS4 and Xbox One as well, so really, there wasn't much of a chance of this hitting 60 FPS on the Switch, and hey, it's a huge improvement over the games which served as inspiration. Even then, it doesn't mean everything's 100% locked. When running through parts of the world, for instance, you can absolutely run into dips like this. It only lasts for a short period of time before returning to the 30 FPS line, but hey, there it is. In general, slowdown like this tends to appear most often when traveling from one end of the map all the way to the other, and even then, it only happens on an intermittent basis. It can also pop up in other areas with a large view of the surrounding map, but again, it clears right up rather quickly. What's interesting here though is that a lot of this slowdown only really became evident after expanding the map, at least in this first stage. The second stage runs even better. When you first enter the world, it's reduced in size and complexity, but eventually you have the option to expand it. The larger world places a greater strain on the hardware, and this is where our examples have been pulled from. Well, there are some dips that can occur at any point, and those are the alpha effects which fill the screen, which is precisely where the Xbox One had issues as well. This includes things like water washing against the camera or flame jets near it. Still, despite these few dips here and there, the majority of the experience plays out at a locked 30 frames per second. Even better, it seems to run slightly smoother overall in handheld mode, not unlike other games we've seen on the Switch thus far. And really, it's exactly this handheld mode which really stands out here. This type of exploratory platform makes for a great portable experience. It's easy to pick up and start playing at any point while going for a goal of your choice while you have the time. It's one of those games that really benefits from this style of play. Okay, so there's one last thing I want to discuss, and that's the loading times. At this point, Yooka-Laylee is downloadable only, and thus things like loading will be impacted by the speed of your memory card. When running from a relatively fast SD card, Yooka-Laylee can require up to 10 extra seconds or so to finish loading when compared to the PlayStation 4 version. In comparison, when running from the internal storage, loading is boosted ever so slightly in our experience. So the takeaway is that you're either going to want to install it to internal storage or use the fastest SD card possible to decrease loading times. Thankfully, no matter which way you go, Yooka-Laylee only weighs in at 5.3 gigabytes, so it won't be eating up a ton of space on your system. In the end then, Yooka-Laylee on Switch is a great port and one of the best examples of a large-scale Unity game on the system. Minor cuts are made in all the right places and performance is kept mostly intact at a stable 30 frames per second. You'll definitely get the best performance and visual quality on PS4 or Xbox One, but the Switch manages to hang very closely, which is an impressive feat. So if you were on the fence about this game and worried that it may not run well on the Switch, don't be. The port is well worth your time. It's also a perfect way to finish off an incredible year on the Switch for fans of platform games such as myself. Between Yooka-Laylee, Super Mario Odyssey, Sonic Mania, Blaster Master Zero, Mighty Gunvolt Burst, Shovel Knight, and more, the Switch is shaping up to be a platform lover's paradise. That's all for this video though. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, this is John, signing off.